Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Oh, recording has started. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Very happy to be with you today. My name is Michael Mahan. I am the Senior Vice President for Home and Distribution at Schneider Electric. I'm here today to spend a little bit of time talking about investor readiness from a product management point of view. So what is it that you have to have ready around your product, around your offer, your go-to-market strategy when talking to potential investors? I'll give a little bit of introduction about myself, kind of who I am, what my background is, why I'm qualified, I think, to talk about this. And then I'll just take you through some examples of some pages that we see sometimes from the companies that we invest in, as well as some general tips and advice for how you might want to go about this. So, as I stated earlier, my name is Michael Mahan. I work for Schneider Electric. We are focused on energy management and sustainability. We were recently ranked one of the most sustainable companies in the world, and we have a big focus on energy and electrification. And so the part of the business that I work in is called home and distribution, and that has to do with all of the energy and electrical infrastructure in and around the home, all the way up through kind of light commercial. So if you think about if you live in an apartment or a multifamily building, the energy footprint of a building like that is quite large, and we help to distribute that safely and efficiently. If you live in a single family home, this would be the panel that lives out in your garage, and we have a lot of technology inside those individual circuit breakers that protect you from all sorts of different hazards and other things that you don't have to worry about. Increasingly, our focus tends to be on what we talk about as the new energy landscape. So as homes are getting more sustainable, as power resiliency is becoming much more important in the world, so the ability to have power continuously in your home, we find that more and more homes in different places around the world are adopting things like solar, geothermal, battery backups for those systems. And we have to try to work to bring all of that together from an energy footprint standpoint, and also, frankly, just add the commensurate intelligence required to make it all work well together. So let's say that I'm in a power outage situation in California. Rather than having to manually choose what I turn on or turn off in my house to make my battery last the longest, we think that the system should have the inbuilt intelligence so it can say, hey, we understand how you live your life. We understand that it's 3 p.m. on a Saturday. The temperature outside isn't so hot. We think we can shut off these things, but we know you're going to want to keep on these outlets, these plugs, this television, these appliances, because this is how we know you live your life typically. On the other side, maybe it's 9 p.m. at night. We know that largely the family is asleep. We want to make sure that the upstairs is receiving backup power, and maybe not so important that the kitchen and the office are. So we're working increasingly in that direction, and have launched a lot of products around that space. But prior to that, if I just think back on my whole career and why I think the team and Mike asked me to come speak with you today. So I've had a long career launching all sorts of different hardware and software products in several different industries. So I started my career with GE Energy. We launched lots of commercial electrical equipment. You can see that in kind of the upper left piece of the slide. Things that were designed to route and protect power for all sorts of commercial and industrial applications. From there, I moved into our electric vehicle infrastructure business. So I led the team that launched our Watt Station product around the world. This was our line of electric vehicle chargers, both for home and for fleets. Some of these were some of the first quote unquote connected or IoT products in our history. This was back in 2010, 2011, when connecting products via an app on your phone was still kind of things that we were all toying with a little bit. I moved from there into our appliances business. So have spent time launching pizza ovens, refrigerators, beverage centers, all sorts of different things that go in the home. And then now, as I mentioned earlier, I lead our home and distribution business, and you can see some examples of our circuit breaker products and our newest and most exciting product up on the top right, which is our Energy Center product that is specifically built to enable all of the connections you need for solar and battery backup in the home today. So in summary, I've launched lots and lots of hardware. Much of that hardware has been connected to back-end IoT software or apps. have a good understanding of kind of what it takes to bring those products to market, as well as, when you're looking at the health of one of these products after you've launched it, what types of KPIs or key performance indicators should you really look at? And so with that in mind, when Mike asked me to come and speak a little bit about when we're looking at companies, what should they tell us about their product that makes us as kind of a big potential strategic investor interested, or frankly, other folks like venture capitalists and private equity interested as well. And so short description, and then I'll talk a little bit about each of these and then show some examples kind of down the road. So first and foremost, and you would be surprised, but the number of presentations that I have sat in from startups and folks that are looking to present their solution to us that actually take 25 pages before they get to the actual specific piece of hardware or software, that happens more frequently than you imagine. So be very clear. It is aspirational and important to talk about things like, here is the market we want to address, here is the problem we're trying to solve. But at some point, be very clear. What is the specific piece of hardware or software that you're actually pitching today? What is it that you are making? What is the solution that you are bringing to market? Around that specific piece of hardware or software, what, if any, specific intellectual property do you hold? So, we will frequently look at, are these utility patents? Are they design patents? Have you submitted it and you haven't yet received any type of grant on the patent? Kind of where are you in that entire process? And be able to articulate, here is the patent that we've submitted. Here are the specific claims around the hardware or software. Here's where we are in the patent granting process. And here are the parts of the world that qualifies for. So some folks may begin by only focusing IP in the country that they're starting in. Just be clear and upfront about that so folks can understand exactly what you're talking about with your hardware. The second thing that I always encourage folks to talk about is, what is the relevant team experience for the product via hardware or software you have developed or are developing? So a little bit of what I just did as we started talking at the beginning here. Hey, here's some other stuff that members of the team have done. We've brought this service to market. We've brought this product to market. That helps establish some credibility. As a person that has launched many, many different kinds of hardware, I can tell you that you don't get really good at it until you've done a couple. And you start to understand these are the typical supply chain issues that you can run into. These are the specific fabrication problems. Here's where we always have issues around electronics. That type of stuff you kind of can only get through experience. And if you have that experience, you should highlight it. Because as an investor, when we see someone that comes to us and says, hey, I'm launching this piece of hardware, here's 5 other things I've launched. One of the things that makes us feel better about is, okay, this person knows what to look out for. This person has been down the road before. They've launched a thing. They've dealt with the crisis. They've dealt with parts that show up that are out of spec. They've dealt with rolling out software that maybe had to have cybersecurity fixes done to it. It just kind of gives a little bit of credibility that shares, here's what I've done and here's where I'm specifically capable of. If you have a hardware background and the thing that you're pitching tends to be more software based, you want to speak to the fact that there is maybe some talent gaps that you want to go close and you're seeking to hire and you're actively working on that. Vice versa, if you have a pure software background and you're looking to make kind of a hardware play tied to a software subscription or something like that, you want to be upfront and say, we don't have experience in hardware, but here's the specific hires that we're looking to make in order to back that up. The phrase that you often hear talking to investors is bits versus atoms. So if this is a team that is used to working in bits and software, they're going to need some expertise in atoms or hardware, and vice versa. If this is a team used to working in hardware, they're going to need some software. So speak to what your specific experience is and be comfortable saying, hey, we don't have this expertise, but we're going to go out and get it, and that will make folks feel better. The third thing that I think is pretty important is to be able to very cleanly articulate how you stack up versus identified competitors. And so, again, one of the things I've seen that can derail a pitch or a conversation, someone in the room may be very familiar with your space or your opportunity and says, hey, well, what about competitor X? What you're doing looks a lot like competitor X. One, if the team isn't aware of competitor X, that's always a big red flag. And then you say, okay, well, maybe this team doesn't really know this space as much as they think they do. But two, if they are aware of them, but attempt to kind of hand wave away, well, oh, we're not that worried about them. Be very specific. Here are the competitors that we're looking at. Here's a list of 5 of them. Here's things that we think are interesting about each one. Here's reasons why we think we're better or worse than each specific competitor. I think if you can speak to that, and look, again, as with the prior bullet point, it doesn't all have to be good news. You can say, hey, look, here's 5 competitors. We think we're in a better position than these 3. These 2 are doing something that's different or interesting that we're trying to keep our eye on a little bit more. And we want to learn a little bit more about this, and we're concerned about some intellectual property that they have in this area. We might have to work around it. All of it just speaks to, your market, who you have to beat out there in the market, and you're familiar with your competition. So try to make a point for each of your products of saying, here's how we stack up versus competition. 4th thing is, what are the financials of your product? What are they today? What do we think they could be tomorrow? And how are we going to get from point A to point B? And so if you've got 3 products in your portfolio, you should be able to say, here's the average selling price for each one of these products. Here's the average landed cost for each one of these products, and here's our margin for each one. And then when you roll it up in the aggregate level, that should roll to, here's our revenue for product line 1, revenue for product line 2, revenue for product line 3. Here's the margin level for each one of these. Here's how that's changed over time. For each one of those products, you want to be able to show very clearly the segments that you're playing in. So maybe product 1 plays more in the commercial or industrial segment. Maybe product 2 is more in the residential space. Maybe there's different geographies that the different products serve. You just want to be able to paint that picture so you can have a clear understanding of, here's what the products are, and here's where we think they're going. A little bit of that is kind of forecasting out into the future. And I would just encourage you, and Mike and the team can speak a little bit more about this. When you're doing forecasting for growth rates out there, whenever you're dealing with cities, municipalities, big companies, big, large entities, just be prepared that ramp up is probably going to be longer than most folks anticipate. So if I see a presentation for a product in this space that says, hey, we're doing $1 million today, and by Q3 we think we'll be doing $30 million, I'm skeptical because I know that the ramp on some of these big swings like this can typically be slower, and that's okay. I think that most investors today that are investing in this particular space are well aware of that, and they're equipped to be making investments for kind of the longer haul. But in summary, have the financials of your product ready and be able to talk about where are the dollars coming from, both on the top line, the revenue side, and what are the cost inputs on the bottom side, on the cost side. And then the last thing I always like to end with when we're talking to any team, most teams don't launch one version of one thing and then say, okay, we're done. That's our company and our plan. Most teams have a well-developed roadmap. Here's what we're thinking of for the next couple of years. Here's the type of features we want to go after. There's all sorts of different ways for doing this. You could be using Agile, and it could be a backlog look. It could be more traditional kind of hardware product stage gate roadmap planning. But in summary, it is a look at what is your plan for the future versus kind of just the product that you have in the market today. And what all investors want to see is that you are thinking about that. That you don't think that when you put one product into the market, that's it, you've solved all the problems and you can walk away. They want to understand that you have a clear plan to actually keep iterating, keep developing, and going forward. It also is a good predictor, frankly, for what your burn rate could be, what your CapEx is going to have to be, and the amount of money that you're going to spend. And so it will help investors size, okay, if I'm getting into this and making an investment in this company or this idea, here's what I have to be prepared for in the coming years, because here's what's likely required to continue to iterate and grow in the space. I have seen companies in the past where they don't pay enough attention to their development roadmap. They raise money in a way that allows them to kind of support their short-term costs, but they are ultimately overtaken by a competitor who has developed version 1.2 or version 1.3 that starts to erode their preference in the market. So just be planning for your future roadmap, understand what you think the needs of investment are in your business, and be able to show that and speak about that in an articulate way. So again, overall, what is the hardware or software that you're developing? What's the problem you're trying to solve, but what is the hardware you're developing? Do you have any intellectual property around it? How well is it protected? What is the experience of the team, and have they done stuff like this before in a way that would make investors feel comfortable with this? How do you stack up versus competition, their product, their sales, their team as well? What are the financials of your product? Where do you make your money? What are the drivers of your cost? And then lastly, what is your long-term product development roadmap? This really is the heart of what I would think of a product data room that we would like to see when we look at kind of the product development roadmap from different companies. So just to show a couple examples of that to be useful. So, here is a view of what a product evolution could look like for a particular company. So here's product 1, product 2, product 3, product 4. Here's the growth rates, the compound annual growth rate over a period of time, 2014 to 2019. Here's the margin over time, and here's the sales mix of those products. So you can really look at a page like this, and you can start to get a very quick understanding of kind of what the company is and where they view their different dollars coming from. So, right off the top of my head, on a company like this, if I were to look at it, and this is an example of an actual company, hey, look, their high margin products at 66 or 57.5 points of margin have their highest CAGRs or growth rates at 17 or 25%. Their low margin product has a kind of lower growth rate at 6.8. And so I can draw some real conclusions here, right? So I can say they're focusing on their high mix products. They're doing a good job of driving these into the market, and they seem to be growing quickly. There's some other products that have a lower CAGR, but they represent a lower part of their sales. And you can just kind of draw some conclusions. So this is an example of a page. You don't have to use something that looks like this format. But I always find that if you can have something like this that talks about your sales, your growth, your margin, and the markets or segments that those products are going into, that's a good example of kind of a product evolution, business roadmap kind of thing. So provide this for you as an example, but feel free to tweak the format as long as you're presenting the data. For a roadmap page, I showed, this is just again an example from some internal roadmap pages we've done in the past couple of years, and these programs all have code names to them. But broadly, here's how we kind of show this type of discussion. So if you take a program like Ad Astra, what that means is that program is going to start in the middle of 2021. It's going to conclude in the middle of 2023. The color coding is that this is focused on buildings. And then we sit up in kind of the game changer category. So this is a big swing. These programs tend to be more expensive, more difficult. Whereas down at the bottom in offer expansion could be just tweaks. These are things that maybe you're doing quick iterations on. But a page like this that lets someone look at your company and say, here's all the different developments they want to do, this is useful. Now, look, what you're looking at is a page from our business with a couple hundred people and engineers working on it. This is a lot of programs running simultaneously. If you have a team of 10 people, I would actually feel quite uncomfortable if you put a page in front of me that showed 7 or 8 or 9 different programs running at the same time. So size this page to the size of your team so you can kind of tell a reasonable story that you have the ability to do this. But broadly, this is kind of what we want to look at when we're looking at different programs. And then for each of these programs, let's take an example at Astra. We would say, okay, give me an overview of what this program is going to be. And you can have, hey, here's the product description. Here's the strategic intent of this product, strategy 1, strategy 2. Here's the value proposition, channel to market, competitors. We have all of our product managers do one of these for every new program that we do. And it allows them to say, here's just kind of a snapshot of what the program is. Here's when we're going to start. Here's when we're going to finish. Here's the unique value proposition. Here's our volumes that we think this could be. Here's the targets for the different market. And we have them fill this out for every one of our pages. Like many of these things, sometimes just the fact of filling these templates, for lack of a better word, can be a forcing function to make you think about some of this stuff. So maybe you've never actually sat down and articulated what you think the key technical risks could be in your product. Having to write it down on the page is a good forcing function to have to stop and think about it. So that was a couple examples of the stuff that we talked about earlier around things that you should include. But the summary, I guess, would be you want to be able to present yourself as knowledgeable of your space, with a vision for the future and an understanding of how you're going to execute to get there. And everything we just talked about is in service to that story. Here's what we know is going on with the market and competition. Here's what we have designed in the intellectual property and the team we've built around it. Here's how that has worked for us in the market and the financials that it's throwing off. And here's what we're planning for the future and what we think we're going to need to get there. That is a complete story. That says that this is a team that's kind of thinking about the entire value chain from problem to solve to how they're going to solve it, and tends to make an investor feel comfortable that this is folks that are thinking about the right stuff. So I thank you for listening to this video. I look forward to answering some live questions from you folks, and I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.